speak the truth anyway. Today, I'm very grateful to be joined by my incredible guest, Josh Carr. He is an author and the host of the Josh Carr Show, which is an incredibly brilliant show on YouTube that is gaining massive traction. And I'm very grateful to have him join me today. Welcome to the show, Josh.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, I'm so grateful because we've been trying to organize this for a minute and you're in Utah.
That's right. Yeah. So it's a little difficult because I have a 1-year-old now. And so I've been really focused on trying to spend as much time with her as possible.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be able to come and do LA in one fell swoop where there are multiple people here. And so I wanted to come sooner, but I was trying to prioritize my daughter.
Wonderful to have you here. That's amazing. Is she your only daughter right now?
Only so far. Wow. We're hoping to have 5.
Okay, that's
we'll see what God gives us.
Very ambitious and amazing. I think you can do it. I know you can do it.
It's ultimately, it's what my wife can do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm willing to support her in any way, but she's really fantastic. I know a lot of women have their first kid. You know, they have ambitions to have a lot of kids. They have one kid and they think, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah. But she is so amazing. She said, I'm ready. Like, let's go for more. So
that's
on
incredible.
Her timetable, we'll have more.
And you guys got married like very young.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's it's like the all-American family dream that you
the goal.
Met and you knew it was right. And then you guys made the commitment and now you have a beautiful family. Yeah. Can you talk a little on that in terms of like the values that you know, went into that with and how you think that just America in general is sort of looking in terms of like the direction it's going with families and your concerns?
Yeah, I think this is one of the things I'm most concerned about in America right now. I've always had an attitude because I've seen it in my community. I live in Utah and I live in a very specific place in Utah where people are very religious, where family is very important. And so I've been able to see the fruits of good families and how happy my friends have been, frankly. Yeah. Divorce is less common. It still happens. But I'm able to see, I think, a lot of families very happy. And so from a very early age, I just had this plan of I'm going to get married as soon as I possibly can, obviously to the right person, but doing that because I've seen that it makes people happy. Yes. And so when I was in college, I went to BYU. People at BYU are of the same faith as myself. So I knew it'd be a really good place to meet someone with the same values as me. And so me and my wife met. She was 21 when we got married. I was 22. Wow. Yeah. And we actually, our daughter was unexpected. We weren't planning on necessarily having kids at that time.
Amazing. Yeah.
And so naturally we felt very scared, but we actually, it's very interesting. I think a lot of people think I'm not ready to have a kid or I need to feel ready, but 9 months I think is a very interesting timetable. I think it's very God-given because over the course of those 9 months, we progressively went from just terrified of having kids to completely ready at the end. And then the last year that we've had our daughter, she's just been amazing. So and I couldn't see it any other way. Yeah,
that's incredible. So it's like God really designed the perfect amount of time.
That's exactly what it is.
Preparing parents to be ready for what's to come. And
that's what I think.
Not too long, not too short. And then all of a sudden, like overnight, what's that experience like going from, you know, one day to being a father overnight? Like what does that feel like?
That is so crazy. Yeah, and I'm very nostalgic about it since my daughter does turn a year this month. So I'm thinking about, like the time of year and when we were in the hospital and stuff. I think it is amazing the amount of love that you do feel initially. But I will say, I do think it's a little different for women and for men. What I've seen in my wife was my wife had these 9 months to get to know my daughter in a way that I couldn't because she was inside of her. For me, there was an initial boost of love, but I think for men, it comes on a little bit more gradually. And I think what shocked me was I felt like I loved my daughter more than I had loved anyone other than my wife. Yeah. But then as time went on, I did not realize my capacity to love was so much greater. Wow. And so I think for men specifically, if you're feeling like, I can't have a kid right now, I'm not capable of that, you would be shocked by how much God can change you and provide for you if you just go for it.
Yes, yes. So well said. I think that's literally a lyric in my song that came out a couple of weeks ago. That, like, anything can change. And he does and he can. And he, like, it's so remarkable to me. It never ceases to amaze me what he can do when we let him and when we ask him and when we like open our hearts to the possibilities. He is a God of miracles, and it's it's profound to me that there are so many miracles happening every day, and people, often are focused on all the doom and gloom, and there's a lot of that too. And I think that he doesn't want us to forget, not for one day, that this life itself is a precious miracle, and that, especially, the ability to bring in new life and love itself, that is the greatest gift that he gives us. And I feel like so much of what's happening in the world right now is, understandably scary for people and understandably dark. But if we forget, that it's like we have this gift, the present today, and if we're not also spending time in it, then things like, families, units of, like, the family unit itself is going to, I feel like, increasingly disappear in a way, because people are living on their screens. People aren't engaged in real life in the same way. So I'd love to know, like, what your view is in how like American culture can become healthier and more loving and more family oriented as we move along, rather than what's looking like it's happening, that people are sort of, becoming more fearful, more individualized in a way that's less communal, and, I don't think good for anyone's mental health.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There is this weird dichotomy between society, which is a group of people, and then individualism. And on one hand, you don't want to be too individual, because then you're not engaging in your community. At the same time, you don't want to be thinking too much about groups of people, and then you forget about changing yourself, or rather letting God change you. And so I think one of the best things that people can do is realize that the world is 95% what you make of it, and 5% what the politicians make of it. And because of social media, we're in a very unique time where people are seeing the world in a way that they couldn't before. They're able to see what's happening in Iran or in Uzbekistan or Nigeria, like things that we never knew about before. And so they're focusing so much on that. And I know this sounds ironic since I'm a political commentator and I talk about these things, but they forget about themselves, and that society grows out of an individual. And if you yourself can focus on being a great person, controlling your life, going and doing the things that you want to do, whether that be creating a business or a podcast, or being a country music star, or being, anything, an entrepreneur, a family man, a mom, if you focus on those things, they will fall into place. The 5% affecting you will probably just roll right off your shoulders. And that's how societies are created.
Yes, that's such a good point. I just made a video talking about, like, what I feel is almost an overwhelming amount of trauma that we're being fed every single day. And of course, I talk a lot about, like, geopolitics on the show just by accident, because I'm passionate about, people, like, I'm ethnically Jewish but Christian by faith. And so I feel like I'm passionately kind of I'm pro-Israel, because that's where my Lord and Savior came from and lived. And, I'm going there soon to walk, the places that he walked, and be baptized in the Jordan River, which is a dream of mine that I've always wanted. And so I feel very passionate towards the fact that that's a holy land, for lots of people. But I feel like geopolitically right now, it's kind of enemy number one to a lot of people, unfortunately, on the left and the right. It's just like so misunderstood, but much more maliciously, like, calculated to be, made it into this enemy of the world, when in actual fact, like, the values of Israel is very similar to the values that we have here in America: freedom mainly, and freedom of religion, and freedom, to exist peacefully. And I just wish that the average person, on the street, especially here in LA, like, kind of understood that fighting against that is fundamentally fighting against even if they, don't have any faith or believe in anything, if they enjoy their freedom, then that's something that I think extreme Islamists have done a tremendous job convincing the Western world that somehow Israel is the correct target of their anger. And it's easy to kind of blame everything on that. But when you actually look at it, if you're a Christian and you call yourself a Christian and you pray to the God of Israel, then it's like there's some massive disconnect. So all of that to say, I am, like, so passionate about the fact that I I believe that there's, a light to be shone on these issues, and I'm certainly, not an expert, and I'm, not political by nature, but it's sort of much more a spiritual thing for me. And so, all of that to say, like, I'm so curious to know, because obviously, like, your show is brilliant, by the way, and you talk so, like, intelligently and eloquently about these incredibly serious issues, but you do it in a way that, is entertaining and insightful. And I just watched the whole, expose of Candace Owens, and I mean, like, for the viewers, like, you did this brilliant, was it a three-part, like, series on, like, exposing, it was like obsession of Charlie, and sort of, to counteract her Bride of Charlie or whatever nonsense she called that, like, which was just an aggressive smear campaign against this beautiful, like, godly woman, Erica Kirk, who was, she, to me, like, anyone attacking Erica is, like, demonically possessed.
I agree.
It doesn't make any sense other than, it's a spiritual war, and she represents the light, and she represents all things good, and Charlie, very much the same, like, it was such a devastating tragedy that he was taken so early from this earth. But the aftermath of that has, I guess, I've seen and I've witnessed, like, this almost like meshing of this passionate anti-Israel side with now this kind of, like, the Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes. What do you think they're, like, how are they so far off and simultaneously getting such great followings and numbers?
It's a really good question. It's something that I've battled with a lot, because obviously we want to, I think there's something innate in us that sees the majority, or at least large groups of people, and thinks that must be where the truth is, because there can't be that many people that have been deceived. And so I understand what you're saying, where it's so hard to understand why these people have such large audiences. I think it's a little bit different depending on the person. I think Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens are fundamentally different. I think they share some opinions. An example would be, I think Candace Owens is purely in it for the money. I don't think she's really ideological at all. And I kind of went into, in my series, her history and how her ideas have changed completely over time. And then maybe they've come back, or they've gone back and forth. And I think the reason why is because she chases whatever she thinks is popular at the time.
Right.
And I think you're right that this anti-Israel wave is very popular online.
Yes.
And so she's simply just seeing the numbers and thinking, if I do this, I'll make more money. And it's working.
Yes.
You can see that in the numbers.
Yes, like 59 million.
And I'll let you into a little secret. This is an interesting thing that happened this week. So I estimated on my show, for those, the audience who may have missed it, that Candace Owens has made around $59 million from talking about Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk since he was assassinated. And a lot of people felt that this number was way too high, because it just feels so crazy. But this week, on Wednesday, I was in Nashville, and I was being interviewed by Jeremy Boring. Who's the founder of the Daily Wire. He's one of the people who helped Candace Owens become very famous. And so after the interview, and I haven't told anyone this, Jeremy and I and a few others were sitting in his kitchen, and we were talking about Candace Owens and some of her narcissistic tendencies.
Yes.
And he looked at me, and he said, him and his producer were there, and they said, "You're the closest person to anybody who has guessed how much she's made."
Wow. That's
and so he shared with me that my numbers may be just a little high. And part of the reason why is because it takes time for advertisers to catch up with large audience growth. And Candace Owens has experienced massive growth since she started peddling conspiracy theories.
Which you showed clearly on this chart, that you can see for yourself this massive spike as soon as she decides, this is what's going to be most profitable.
Exactly. And so what Jeremy and I were talking about together is, as the advertisers catch up with that growth, she will be making $59 million. So that's an accurate number.
Astonishing amount of money. And she's doing it by, smearing and degrading and distorting the truth on, I'd say, some of the holiest people that we've been blessed enough in this, timeline to be alive with. And I am, baffled, I guess, by how many people kind of fall down that rabbit hole and genuinely think that they're getting accurate information. However, unfortunately, I'm a survivor of narcissistic abuse. And so it's something that I by default, just from surviving it, had to learn a tremendous amount about what I was dealing with. And so I have read many books and spoken to so many experts and really have like a comprehensive understanding of the personality disorder of narcissism. And I actually had like a makeup artist for many years she was Candace's makeup artist full time.
Wow.
4 years before that, she was fired from that position. And like I, won't name her, but she poured out, you're getting your makeup done, you spend a lot of time just hanging out with someone, and she was really sweet, and she was just, telling me these stories. And at the time, I was still stuck in this abusive relationship. And I remember just sometimes like my eyes would fill with tears because hearing these stories about how she really was behind closed doors compared to in public. And it was like she was telling this story, and I recognized all, it's this classic playbook of narcissism that everything you spoke about on your show, I was like, yes, yes, Josh, like that is exactly it. Because it's like a divide between there's truth and then there's what they say, and they do not care. They have no inner integrity whatsoever. And it's so wild that they can sit there with a completely straight face, as she does to her millions of viewers every week, and say these statements with complete conviction, which are just lies or very distorted truth that is a tiny fragment of truth compared like with a whole bunch of lies. It's a classic like smear campaign. And this time, it was against Charlie and Erica. So all of that to say, like, do you think that as culturally we learn more and more about narcissism, if people are even interested and they can identify these like qualities like you very clearly have, in your expose or series, do you think that the more we understand that, especially like also from a spiritual perspective, because I think it's the spirit of Jezebel like operating very clearly as well through someone, do you think that people will kind of awaken to the fact that these are some of the people in positions of authority right now?
That's a really good question. I definitely think narcissism is, and a lot of things that are actual mental health are criminally undereducated and undertaught in America, and maybe just in the world in general. I do think if people understood it better, they would probably tune out. But I will say, I think there is a subset of the population. I think as humans, we are very interested in stories. And most of us can see when a story is just too crazy. We go, okay, that's a tall tale. Maybe I'll listen, but I'm not going to believe it. But I do think there's a subset of the population who the crazier the story, the more interested they are.
Right.
And so for Candace Owens, you see her disparaging Erica Kirk and you think that is the craziest person, like literally the craziest person in the world that you could disparage based on the assassination of Charlie Kirk, his own wife. That is the craziest person. But she specifically chose Erica because it would be the craziest, because she knows she has an audience that expects the craziest. And I'm not sure those people will ever, I don't know if they're even capable of understanding narcissism in that way. And I know that sounds really pessimistic.
No, it's
but if they haven't already seen it, I don't know what else we can do. However, I do think there's some people in the middle, and for sure we should 100% focus on them, because I think there are people who can be convinced.
Yes, that's really well said. Someone said that actually exactly to me the other day. Like I'm, telling parts of my story in fragments right now, but in terms of just like the motivation as to why I'm even doing that is with the deep hope that just sharing parts of my story will help, continue to help all these survivors who are reaching out to me. Every day I get these messages thanking me for using my voice and my platform to shine light on what, is otherwise often kept in the dark because it's ugly and shameful and all of those things. But what you said about it's like the great middle, of the people who haven't completely gone down, the whatever that is, that they genuinely, are sort of on the fence in a way, and then they can hear and watch a show like yours and see very clearly that not only like are you coming from a place of godly integrity, but you have facts to back up what you're saying. Your position doesn't change week to week and day to day, depending on who's funding your ad campaign or whatever that is. It's like, it's so clear to anyone with spiritual eyes to see when someone is doing their very best to tell the truth. And if you said something on your show and then you found out later that you had wrong information, you would have the integrity to, so like my belief and hope is that, you know, you're just going to continue on this like upward trajectory and just gain millions of more followers and views and everything, that while people are getting sick of watching somebody, you know, just lie to their face. So do you have any sort of like grand plan of how you think that's going to happen over the next few years? Or
yeah, I talked about this a little bit earlier this week as well. I have an interesting thought process about my show that I don't know if everyone has. I have recently become a little bit more fearful of some of the fame, for lack of a better word, or the views, just because there are crazy Candace Owens followers and people on the left who want to do harm to me and my family. And so some of how I think about my show is I really want to tell the truth and have integrity. I also want to provide for my family. And so my personal aspirations, and maybe this would disappoint some people, is I want to be able to provide for my family in the best way while getting the least amount famous.
That's so wise, Josh. Honestly, I mean, fame in itself is an invisible and meaningless commodity.
Exactly.
It's only...
I completely agree.
Yes.
And so if I'm able to make a good living, I'm not going to lie. I'm like anyone. I like money. Everyone likes money, you know, and it can be corrupting 100%. I'm aware of that. But I agree. Fame, it does nothing for you. I mean, it's totally hollow. All it's going to do is feed your ego. And if I could make some good money and not be famous, I would 100% take that. And frankly, I much more enjoy engaging in small, meaningful ways like this, with one person, talking to them, or even if there was a room of Candace Owens followers, like 10 of them,
yes,
I would much rather go talk to them and try to convince them of the lies that she's telling rather than getting on a podcast and trying to talk to a million people.
Wow.
I really think that's more impactful.
Yes.
I think that's more satisfying to people.
Yes.
And you're not going to get as many death threats from crazy people.
Oh my gosh. Unfortunately, there are, especially, you know, online, just so many people that I try to pray for them. I really do. But they are like so far gone in terms of like, I don't know who they answer to. They are clearly, you know, operating under some like massive enemy control because it's dark and it's scary. It's twisted and scary. Yes. And obviously, you know, I mean, the fact that even Charlie was murdered and assassinated in cold blood, it is unfortunately, you know, it's like living in this world where truth needs to be spoken, and people who have integrity, you know, should be finding the courage to speak the truth, even if it doesn't, you know, mean that they have, like you said, it's the most kind of controversial, wild things sometimes that, you know, are getting the most views. But in terms of, I believe that people are deeply hungry for the truth as well. And I think that eventually, you know, if they're coming from the right place and they really, you know, believe her because they think they're being told the truth, and then they find out later that they're being blatantly lied to for profit, I think they're going to have, you know, an awakening moment. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think some people can have that awakening moment. I think it does require, some people have pointed out that Candace Owens is very charismatic, and that there are a lot of these people on what I would call the alt-right, like Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes, who are very talented and charismatic in a certain sense, but they're not telling the truth. I do think that people on the right who are telling the truth need to learn to be charismatic. They need to be likable. They need to have a life, most importantly, that actually exemplifies the things that they talk about.
Yes.
Because one of the problems that we do run into is there are people on the so-called traditional right, which I would consider myself a part of, who talk about traditional principles. They speak against bad people, but then they have all these skeletons in their closet. And it's one thing to make a mistake and repent. That is totally fine. Obviously, that's biblical and all of that's fantastic. But it's another thing to say you're one thing and completely hide things and lie, because that really hurts the cause. And I'm not going to name names, but there are people like that. And I think that we as a conservative right movement or a Christian movement or whatever people want to call themselves need to really choose people they feel have integrity and don't have these skeletons in their closet. And I will say as well, don't put all your faith in one person. I think one mistake that the right did make is they put so much faith in Charlie Kirk that when he was assassinated, it was like, well, who do we turn to? And you had all these people turning to Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens.
Oh my gosh, how could you go from Charlie to Nick?
Exactly, I know.
That's so like impossible to me to make that jump.
I know, and it feels impossible to me too. And some people did jump to the right people.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we need to put our faith in Jesus Christ. Because he will never change.
Yes.
And so, yes, we should have good people on the right. We should never replace them with God himself.
Yes. But I think the best thing that Charlie always did was always direct people to the
agree,
Lord.
I agree. He was great at that.
Time, the most like disturbing part of Candace is she'll use the name of our Lord, and she is literally talking. I mean, we were warned of that, that the enemy comes as a like whatever it's called, the bearer of light or the fault. Like we're warned that wolves come in sheep's clothing, and that we will, it is presented in one way, but the fruit is not there.
That's exactly right.
There is no fruit. The fruit is deception, distortion, profit, love of money, like all of these things that we know aren't of him. And so, but people are like intoxicated by the presentation. So in terms of like, what do you see if you sort of, could predict like over the next few years, do you think that Candace will kind of, have a reckoning that her listeners and followers, do you think that's already happening, or do you think it's just going to sort of like, what do you say?
It's difficult to say. I could see her kind of fading away slowly as people realize that she can't grift off of Erica Kirk forever. At the same time, I do think all throughout the Bible and all throughout history of the world, you see bad people who get away with it. And Jesus Christ says very clearly, they have their reward. And so I don't think God is in the business of taking rich people and making them poor. I think he says that's their reward. They'll be rich on earth. They will not be rich in heaven. Yeah. And so I could very well see that happening to Candace Owens too. I could see her being very popular for the rest of her life, having her one, piece of America that likes to believe her conspiracy theories, and she does very well with that. Yes. But she has her reward.
That's such a brilliant insight, because that is like, you look around and you say like, how do evil people, get away with it? How do they live their, like, how is it possible that, this righteous person is taken too early, and somebody who's lived nothing but, abuse, deception and destruction in their life seems to get away with it scot-free, but ultimately, of course, they don't, because, our lives are but a moment, and eternity is just that. It is eternal. And so that is a lot longer amount of time than the short, like almost glimpse that we exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. In terms of like Nick Fuentes specifically, what on earth do you genuinely think the appeal of him? Like, to me, he looks like a kid dressing up in his dad's suit, pretending like he has, the brain function to string together a coherent sentence. To me, he's almost like a laughable, because he's that bad.
I agree.
What is the appeal?
I don't know. I totally agree with you. I think young men listen to Nick Fuentes more than anybody. I'm 24 years old, so I would be in that camp of a young man, right? And I agree. I don't see the appeal at all. So it's a little hard for me. I do think that there's something kind of fascinating or romantic about seeing someone just say whatever the crap they want. Because we did come from this era of intense censorship. And so Nick Fuentes, truly, I believe his business model is, and I think he's like Candace Owens, where he's not really ideological. He's more just after the clicks. And I think Nick Fuentes' business model is, I'm just going to say the craziest possible thing I can think of today.
Yes.
And I think for young men, they see that. And that in of itself is kind of intoxicating, because maybe for a time they were in a position where they couldn't say the things they wanted to say. Yes. That's not acceptable, of course, but I think that might be where they're coming from. I think ultimately Nick Fuentes, though, for almost all men, will be a thing they grow out of. Yeah. It's just, I completely agree, because you grow up, you get a job, you become a productive member of society, you might get married and have kids, and you look at Nick Fuentes and it is embarrassing. Yes. I mean, he's a man-child screaming at a screen. Yes. He has nothing going for him in life. Yes. I don't know why any man would want to be like him. And I think every single man will come to that conclusion with time. Yes. I do hope, though, and this is one of my main missions on my show, to help younger men realize they can just let him go earlier. They don't need to wait until they're in their 30s. They can do it right now.
Yes. How old is Nick?
I think he's 27 or 28, so a little older than me.
I mean, I have never heard something from him that doesn't make me think, like, does he literally live in this basement? Like, does he have,
I think he does. I honestly think he does.
Actually, like, participate in life. No. Like, his views are distorted beyond anything. Like that's what I think
he does live in the basement. I really do. And part of it is probably because a lot of people don't like him, and so he probably doesn't want to go out in public.
He does, and he's never had a date with a
woman.
And
there's that video. I played it on my show, but there's a video of him. He goes to a club with Andrew Tate and Clavicular.
Yeah.
And Clavicular is like, hey, dude, I'll get you a girl. And he's like, no, I don't talk to girls. And it's like, I don't believe in like premarital sex or anything like that. I think it's good that Nick Fuentes isn't going to do that with a girl, but he doesn't even talk to a girl at a club.
I mean, that would be very good for him to
exactly.
communicate
and
in
all men,
real life.
Like, yes, if you're at a club, you should talk to the women there.
Yes.
That's what you do.
Andrew Tate specifically, like, I mean, I think you almost like answered that with the Nick Fuentes appeal, because to me, like, I don't see anything about either of those two individuals that are aspirational at all. Like, I mean, I know I'm not a man, but I just can't imagine, like, if of all of the role models that anyone could pick, that anyone would look at either of those two men and think that's what I want. Because it's gross.
No,
like,
Andrew Tate's like sitting in his like diaper, like doing his body. It literally looks like a diaper. That's what he wears.
Oh my gosh.
No, I don't know why people would want to be like Andrew Tate, other than the fact that he's, I guess, an entrepreneur. I think that entrepreneurship is important, but of course he created a pornographic company. So that's a horrible business. But I do think building like at least Andrew Tate created a business and had employees. Nick Fuentes has never done anything like that. But I think Andrew Tate is overall a symptom of men wanting to be the worst version of themselves. Sometimes men want to be a pornographer. Sometimes men want to sit in their underwear and talk on a podcast. Those kind of appeal to the natural man, the worst part of men. And the people following Andrew Tate are steering into that. The people who are not following Andrew Tate are deciding to grow up again, just like Nick Fuentes, and actually do what men do, which is not what Andrew Tate does.
Yes, absolutely. So the notoriety that they're experiencing right now, in that people are sort of like, it's like watching a car crash almost, because it's like you're saying, like the appeal is seeing someone say something that no one would say in polite society, or nobody would think to say, and it's really gross and it's really offensive, and they're just like giving themselves permission to say it, and they're becoming very popular because they're saying these horrible things out loud from their basement or whatever. Like, I mean, Nick more so basement wise, but and eventually when, you know, their followers mature into hopefully like fully grown adults that have thoughts outside of what they're like being
working
fed.
brains,
yes, they're going to be like, ew, that's not at all what I want for my life. Like, I don't want to grow up to be Nick Fuentes. Like, who would want to be him? He is literally incapable of talking to.
And what girl would want to be with him?
Well, exactly. No, I mean, does he have any female listeners, followers?
No, I don't think so. I think it's all Pakistanis and young men. I think those are the two groups.
So, I mean, it's like, I think as much as you don't want to be famous, like, you would be a brilliant famous person, because you would actually be admirable and aspirational, and people could look at your life and you know, rightfully say, that is the direction I want to go in. That's the kind of man I want to become. And unfortunately, there are very few. You know, Charlie was one.
Yeah, he was one.
And it's like, we need more actual men to show young boys growing up that it's possible to grow into a good man. And unfortunately, you know, the outcome of not having that so much is that I feel like a lot of young men are particularly lost.
Yeah.
And I don't sort of see that necessarily changing unless individuals like yourself are going to step up and sort of step into the roles of being someone that they can actually look to as a role model. Because, I mean, Andrew Tate is not a role model for anyone.
No, I agree. They need to have good role models. I think part of that is we do have to break a cycle. We've seen that single motherhood has gone way up. Not just, obviously it's been the worst in the African-American community, but it's also going way up in the white community, and basically every demographic in America. And I think when young men specifically don't have a father to look to, that's a real problem. And so the number one message, like literally the number one thing I care about on my show, is I try to encourage young men, go find a good woman, get married, because somebody has to break the cycle.
Yes.
If you don't have a father to look up to, I really sympathize with you, but you can be the change.
Yes.
You can go get married, and then you can show your son, and he can show his son for as long as your generations go on. But somebody has to make that change.
Yes.
And there's no reason it can't be you.
Absolutely. So, yes. And like, I am a great believer in being able to be the one to break generational curses. I mean, my story is way too complicated to tell right here, but I don't have biological family. I don't have, you know, anyone that I experienced God's love from growing up, but I found it myself by seeking him, and he showed me.
Amazing.
He is, there available to every soul who's seeking him. And he tells us that, he shows us that, and he continues to reveal more as I go along this path. And I do my very best, every day to be the version of me that I believe he wants me to be. But it's definitely, not something that was handed to me. And I think that from that, I can just share that there is no such thing as, too far gone, or you can be from the wrong place or the wrong background or whatever. You can find him no matter what. Like, he is there. He wants to have a relationship with you. And I think that if there, do you think there's this big spiritual awakening happening right now simultaneously to all this kind of chaos?
It's tough. I want to be optimistic. I see some of the numbers, and some of the numbers do look very good. At the same time, it does feel like more people are lost than ever. I think, I personally believe in the second coming of Jesus Christ. I believe he will come back and reign on the earth. And I think the scriptures are very clear that before that, he will separate the wheat from the tares, meaning there will be a great separation. And I think we may be going through that right now. I think there may be many people kind of in the middle who are now starting to peel off and decide to become followers of Jesus Christ, or deciding to be like Candace Owens followers and follow man.
Yes.
And so I guess the answer is both. Yes and yes. I just think we're becoming more polarized.
Yes.
And in a way that's sad. In a way, I guess that's the signs of the times. And that means that we're closer to Christ coming again.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good point, that all this was prophesied and forewarned. And I am of the personal belief that we are living currently in the book of Revelation, because I can see with my eyes what is happening in the world. And you're so right that, it was prophesied that the wheat and the tare would be separated, and that separation is not going to come in the form of just who denies him, as Lord. It's the people who profess his name, but then will arrive, in heaven, or at least to his face, and that he will say, I never knew you. Yep. That, is very specific. And they'll be like, what I said, Lord, Lord, and I, did this in your name. And they will be turned away because they did not actually have a real relationship with the living God, who isn't just a figment of an imagination or something to use as clickbait, or however Candace and Tucker, I don't believe there's any way that Tucker could possibly be actually walking with Christ, because he is,
I don't either.
Just, there's nothing Christ-like about him whatsoever. There's just no way. And I think that the more that's revealed, that people can speak his name, but if there's nothing about their embodiment that is even remotely Christ-like, then they're a deceiver. Where does that come from? It's father of the lies. They're very good at it as well,
Yeah, I think this is a really important point that we've talked about a few times already, but by their fruits you shall know them. I think there's a huge confusion going on right now in the world. I think a lot of people are having a hard time understanding what is truth. For a long time, people were talking about my truth, or this moral relativism of everyone can kind of just decide what's true. There is one truth. It's Jesus Christ. And I think one of the best ways to know who's a follower of Christ and who isn't is by their fruits.
Yeah.
And so to anyone out there who feels like they're in the middle, they feel like, oh, but I kind of like listening to Nick Fuentes, but I also enjoy listening to Firerose. I would say, look at the fruits of these people. Are their lives full of chaos and anger and hatred? Probably what they're talking about is not Christ.
Yes.
If they talk about Jesus Christ and their lives are happy and they're thriving in every way, chances are they're probably a solid person. That doesn't mean that you should replace them with God, but it means that they're probably saying something that has merit to it.
Yes, and they're directing their followers towards the actual living God, not themselves. Because ultimately, every single one of us as believers, we are believing in the all powerful and all knowing and eternal presence of God Himself, and that's a almost like a obligation to point people, because I didn't do any of the miracles in my life. God did. I'm bearing witness, and I can, testify, and I can share my testimony. But ultimately, I have people in my comments being like, you didn't, God didn't do that. You did that. Or girl, take the credit or whatever. And I'm just like, how much clearer can I be? All I did was ask, be willing, open my heart to Him, and never lose my faith, no matter what. Ever since I, declared Him as the Lord over my life, I never considered the possibility that wasn't, even no matter what I was going through, and holding on like steadfastly to my faith is the only way I survived. So if anyone, looks at my story and they're like, well, that's cute, she believes in Jesus. Like, no, like I've walked through, tremendous amounts of pain with him, and he has never forsaken me. And I know him because of that. And I'd want to give as many people as I possibly can that same gift. It's the greatest gift imaginable. So I do my best. But
I feel like what people miss with that too is like they're watching you and they see the light in your eyes and they say, that's just you. But they didn't see your journey.
No.
They didn't see you before you had the light in your eyes.
Exactly.
And so it's easy. It's very easy for us because we're seeing our story and we're saying, no, trust me, before was not like this.
Yes.
And so the best way for people to understand is for them to go through it themselves. And so I completely agree. As we direct people towards Christ, that's the right track, because that's really ultimately how you gain faith and a testimony of him is when he works in your life. It's hard to see it in other people's lives in that same way.
Yes, exactly. Like God doesn't have grandchildren. Like it has to be that direct father relationship. And so, I know that there's parts of my story that seem almost like unfathomable because just against all odds. And, I was a homeless drug addict 10 years ago. In May, I'll be celebrating 10 years of sobriety.
Congrats.
Thank you. Like, I can't believe it, but I can because I know who he is. And he was there with me, walking aside me on the streets of LA as a homeless drug addict. He was there in the jail cell that I gave my life to him. He was there every single day, every moment through years of narcissistic abuse. I never thought it was a good idea to, sort of like, even no matter what the amounts of pain even that I had to go through soberly, it never made me doubt that he'd given me this gift of sobriety, that I knew it was from him, because it was completely impossible against all odds. And it wasn't, like my experience was, it wasn't like a program or something, those things exist and they're wonderful and they can direct people, but ultimately it was all directing to God. And if I hadn't have developed that, great relationship with him, then there's no way I would have survived, because I, wasn't even allowed to have community for years. I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to go to church, So if I hadn't have had that personal relationship with him in the quiet place, then I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. I wouldn't have survived that. And that's a miracle in itself, So
that's amazing.
I want to share that with people, but the only way that I can do that is to point them to him, because like that, and I think as many people, who sort of doubt, like, oh, well, there's something, but it could be anything. I met a girl last night. She was like, I prayed to God on my knees to give me a sign, and he gave me a sign, and I was like, would you believe in him? She's like, no. And I was like, okay.
And that's like, actually, that's a great point. Like people think oftentimes if something crazy would just happen, I would then believe in God. But that is every single story in the scriptures shows the contrary.
Yes.
There are people in the Bible over and over again who are non-believers who see signs and they still continue not to believe.
Right.
You have to choose to believe.
Yes.
You have to develop that faith slowly in Jesus Christ in order to see miracles. If you see the miracles, you won't even recognize them if you don't have faith in Christ.
That's a really good point. So he can literally perform miracles right in front of someone.
Yeah, you won't
and
have
if
any
they're
idea.
unwilling, or they have, they don't want to believe, or they don't want to see, then it doesn't affect them and it doesn't transform them. That's really interesting. So did you always have that profound faith? Like, did you grow up knowing he was who he is?
Yeah, I can really attribute it to my parents. I have fantastic parents, and they taught me faith in Jesus Christ. I think I've always had it my entire life.
Yeah.
But like any young man, I've gone through times of sin. And whenever you sin, you are separating yourself from God and from the Holy Ghost. And so I felt, even though I still had faith in him, I felt distanced from him because of the things that I was choosing to do. And I've also felt what repentance is, and accepting Jesus Christ again. And so even though I haven't quite had maybe the same experiences as you have in that way, I have felt that separation from God, and I've been able to reconcile myself to him through Jesus Christ. Yeah. And I think my faith is stronger today than it ever has.
Yeah.
And I think that's the goal that all of us should have, is whatever your faith is at the moment, whether it's large or small, just try to incrementally increase it by putting your faith and trust in Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I think any degree of increase is something that makes God happy.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. Like that it doesn't have to be, it is like, I mean, he tells us that it's just a mustard seed that we need, and what the miracles he can do with that. So yeah, it's like, I think sometimes, I mean, we all feel like we fall short, we could be doing so much more, or, we're just these like very fallible humans, but I think, if we're always seeking the best version of ourselves for him, and we're always seeking to repent for our sins, and we're always like trying to better ourselves to be the version of ourselves that when we do leave this earth, that he welcomes us and says, good and faithful servant, that is what we all want to hear. But, and I know it's not up to us to like judge anyone else's salvation, but I don't believe there's any way that you could spend your entire life preaching lies, smearing people, holy people, and distorting people's brains for profit, and then get to the end and, have a chance to just say like,
I take it back.
Yeah. Like, I think it does matter how we live here. Of course, predominantly our belief that he is who he is, but I think it's clear that, it doesn't say that he's just like, he's not Febrezis. You can't just like spray him over your sin and then it just disappears. Like he knows our hearts. He can see our hearts. He created our hearts, and he knows when we're coming from good intention, and he can see all of that. And he can see, what do you think? Yeah.
C.S. Lewis in The Great Divorce, if you've ever read The Great Divorce, it's a very small book and it basically outlines this perfectly, but it comes at it in a little bit of a different light, which is that there's a man who is going to heaven, and he is witnessing all these different relationships as they are essentially deciding where they're going to go. And what he observes, and kind of the main point of the book, is that there are people who throughout their lives have not learned what heaven is, or have not learned the character of Jesus Christ or God. And so they do not want to go to heaven because they have not learned him. I'm trying to think of like an example of what that would be, but I suppose, and I won't use any specific person because I don't want to judge anyone's salvation, but if someone has spent their life lying and cheating and using people and then want to just declare Jesus Christ at the end, I'm not so sure that they'll even want to, because to act that way and then be in the presence of a perfect being forever, I think would make you pretty uncomfortable. And to maybe be in the presence of all the people that you wronged and didn't right? You didn't have reconciliation with those people. I don't think any of those people are going to want to be in that position. And so I actually think judgment will very much be a personal decision with Christ. I think many of us will want to be with Jesus Christ. I mean, I just, from speaking to you, I feel like when I die and I meet Christ face to face, I will say, I want to be with you. And I hope he says that back. I think there may be many people who see Jesus and they have a perfect knowledge of their sins and the things that they've done wrong, and they will not want to be with Christ because of how uncomfortable they will feel in his presence.
That is so interesting because of course, like, he is the light, and light is threatening in a way to darkness. And it is like people who are living, two different lives, one behind closed doors and one in the public, and they are, split in these very deceptive ways, and they're presenting as an angel of light, but they're actually like Satan himself. That they are made to feel extremely uncomfortable, almost like, what's that Wizard of Oz thing, like the Wicked Witch of the West, and she's like melting, and all it takes is just like a bucket of water. It's like, the kind of like exposing nature of light and love itself, and how powerful that is, and how, like, it's like the presence of Christ when it washes over you is something so like deeply moving to the point that there's no words to even really describe it. Like, his presence is overwhelming in its beauty, but also I think you're right in that, like, people just like in this life that they, don't want to be shown, they don't want to be exposed. Like, he will expose it all. And if they haven't ever repented, or they haven't ever even acknowledged the hurt that they've done here on this earth, then it's like that will kind of be the end of their soul, because ultimately, it takes humility, it takes all these qualities of him. Like, so many people, I don't think they even, have ever considered possibly being humble. Like so many people, like Candace Owens, I couldn't imagine her even. Sorry, I know that's specific again, but I can't. Like, there's nothing humble about her entire being.
Yeah,
there's nothing human, kind of like about the way that she. It's just accusation after accusation, and you know, like false accusation, and it's all based on nothing. Like, imagine just like a soul like that being stripped of all its, you know, money, fame, power, and just being there bare in front of Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what people are thinking about is they feel like there will be this magical change when you meet God and are judged, but I don't know why that would happen. I think that's a weird assumption to have. If somebody has lived their whole life one way, we don't expect them magically in 1 year to be a completely different person, or maybe one day or a week. They're going to be the same person. They've developed these habits over time. I don't think just because we died, we're suddenly going to be completely different. I think we will be the same people.
Yes.
And I think that we're not, even though being in the presence of Christ will be an incredible experience, I think we will still be the same people. And the people who decided to be bad in this life and develop attributes of Satan instead of Christ will continue to have those attributes because they did not choose Christ in this life.
I believe that wholeheartedly. And also, and something, you know, especially because I have met many people in my life that don't even know that who they are seeking and even embodying is Jesus. And they are more Christ-like than some people who profess his name. I think that in that kind of interaction, it's going to be almost like they'll be so shocked to know, like, oh my gosh, it was him the whole time.
Yes.
And of course their heart is going to be pure enough and open enough to profess their love for him, because they'll be like, you know, it was you. Like, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But I think in this life, you know, for whatever reasons, culturally or like, that's my belief, is that all these truly good people, that even if they weren't sort of, if they were Christ-like in this life, and they really were, they were loving and honest and generous and, you know, all of the qualities and sinless, in as much as a human can be sinless, but they were, you know, repenting when they did hurt someone, and they were, you know, just Christ-like. Like, those people will get to heaven and be welcomed with open arms by, you know, like the true God. And I think that so many people who have done tremendous amounts of harm in his name will be the ones that he is like, I never knew you. And I can't wait. I mean, like, I don't know if we'll get to see that.
I think that's good to say. I think that is good to say. I can't wait, because I think wanting justice is a righteous cause.
Yeah.
And people who say they can't wait tend to be the kind of people who love Christ. They want to see him again.
Yeah.
I believe something similar when it comes to the afterlife and how we'll be judged, because one of the great questions of Christianity is, what about all of those people who had no opportunity to even hear about Jesus Christ? I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, but almost every Christian agrees that the only way to heaven is through Jesus Christ. However, again, there are good people who have lived who never even had that opportunity. Yes. And so I believe after we die, we will have an opportunity, if we did not in this life, to accept Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And I believe there will be many people who, like you said, lived Christ-like lives, not even realizing where that came from. But when they do realize where it came from, they will wholeheartedly accept him.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. That was so beautifully said. That is exactly what I believe, because I think there's so much scripture that points to that in terms of like people, like he continually points out that people are, you know, easily deceivable by the outside, you know, like sort of like, don't judge a book by its cover, essentially, but much more like scriptural passages saying that, because it's the heart. And so even that works the opposite way, that if someone is judged, you know, on their outside and, oh, they must be, you know, this way because they present in the world a certain way, like he doesn't see any of that. He only sees our soul. He only sees our heart, and he only sees who we truly are in our character. Whereas the world, you know, it's like, that's why we're very clearly warned, like, don't be of the world. Don't try to, because the world as it is, and I don't know if that's ever going to change, like values, you know, money and status and superficiality over everything else, to the point where it's like gross. And, you know, people like Andrew Tate get in positions of influence, and it's like, what? Like, what, really? But that's the world, you know, and I don't see that necessarily changing, unfortunately. Do you?
No, I don't. And I think that's why we should be very careful whenever we say such and such. Like, I know you've never said this, but there's a lot going on online right now where people are saying but they have so many followers. Or look who's the number one podcast.
Goodness.
And these are like Christians saying this. And I'm like,
yes.
You're just proving our point.
Yes.
They are of the world.
Exactly.
Like,
yes,
the world loves them. We're not saying they don't make a ton of money and that they aren't famous.
Yes.
You know, we talk about it with, for some reason, people on the right understand that when it comes to politicians. We understand that when it comes to Hollywood.
Yes.
But when you talk about their favorite podcaster, for some reason, the rules don't apply anymore.
So
I completely agree. Like,
wow.
Yeah, they're popular for a reason. They're of the world.
Yes, yes. That's so true. And, you know, it's very clear that it's a narrow path and that like it's you know, easier to fit a camel through the eye of a needle than it is to enter the kingdom of heaven as a rich man. And that's because of the fact that to me, that's like such a clear statement of worldliness, you know, what's valued in the world. That's the norm and that's the common, and people get to the end of their lives and that's all they've ever pursued, and they might, you know, pay homage in some regard verbally to Jesus, but they've never let him enter his like their hearts. They've never tried to get close to him. They've never, you know, completely surrendered in humble praise that like, please Lord, you know, just be with me. And therefore they've never been changed by him. And so like they're part of the camel's not fitting through the eye of a needle, which is a really hard thing to do. Like, it's not easy.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people miss with that is we assume sometimes, for those of us who are like aren't rich, we think, oh, these rich men were born like this, where they are going to have a harder time getting into heaven. But the reality is they were born in the same position as all of us, but because the wealth corrupts, because the fame corrupts, that's the reason why it's so difficult. It's not saying no one who's ever been famous or rich will get into heaven. It's just, if you have those things, they are going to fight against the spirit of God.
Yes.
This is why earlier, you know, we were talking a little bit about me growing and things like that. And this is why I'm wary of becoming famous, because I know that I am reconciled to God right now, but I know that fame corrupts. And I think I would be cocky and prideful to think that I'm just the exception to that rule.
That's so insightful. And you're right. It takes like an extra amount of those like people that have that level of power, because with fame comes power. And you know, power can very easily corrupt. And then that you have a bunch of enablers around you who are perfectly happy to also, you know, be corrupted or participate in atrocious behavior because they have essentially put that person on a pedestal, like over God, because they're not answering to God. And I've, you know, experienced some wild things in my own personal life in that regard that just baffles me, because I'm like, at the end of the day, like, you know, this person is like, when they're out of your life and then you don't feel that sort of like whatever, that intoxication of that person sort of, you know, having you in a circle for now, you're going to be alone with God. Yeah. Who do you answer to? Because like, I just, it really blows my mind, because I'm like, in your quiet moments, who else is there? Like, who are you talking to? I guess. I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Like,
no, that is very underrated. I think if you look at the Bible, I try to find a lot of patterns from the Bible, and I try to look at what the prophets have done, because the prophets have done so many amazing things. I'm not going to be a prophet, but I would love to emulate their lives. Yeah. One of the greatest patterns of the Bible is that great people do great things when they just sit and think and ponder and pray. And sometimes in life, we think that everything has to be so crazy. We have to always be doing something. And we really forget to just give ourselves to God and just chill, because you're right. If you're alone with God. Yes. And I think some of the best inspiration, whether, again, if you're wanting to be an entrepreneur or a father or a mother, if you're trying to achieve something that you believe is difficult, one of the best ways to do that is go sit in a room for 30 minutes every day and do nothing but pray and read the scriptures. Yes. Just be quiet. And honestly, you don't have to even read the scriptures. Like, you can read the scriptures for 5 minutes and then just sit there. Yes. And think, ponder, pray. You don't have to be actively doing something. I think the more silent we are and the more time we just spend with us and God, the more we receive that inspiration. Absolutely. And gain direction for our lives. Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Which is why, like, you know, bringing us back to the very first thing we talked about in terms of the like family and home environment being a peaceful, loving one, that you can have those moments and it not be, you know,
chaotic and distorted and full of, like, when you're in survival mode, it's really hard to have that quiet time, but it doesn't mean you can't still be reaching for it. And then God in his infinite love will get you out of it. That's my, experience and belief. And so there's nothing that seeking that is not going to like improve in your life if you're looking for that, because there's nothing also in this world that is more precious than that time and that presence. And, that's, they say like the present is the gift and all that cliche, but like it's true, because that's all we have. We know, none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. But thank you so much for coming in and joining me on the show. It's been amazing getting to talk to you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Josh.